welcome. It's that time, once again, the Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website, let's face it, we keep everybody comfortably disturbed at allamericangold.com. It's another great one today. Make sure you get out there. We had Gerald Celente. He was on USA Watchdog. So if you want to see that interview, that's out there. All kinds of stuff to keep you in the know. And we got so much stuff going on. Today is, the Everything's Okay Day. The Dow was down, almost 600 points on Friday. Don't worry, it's up 300-plus points today. Again, though, you got too much time in the day left. Someone could say something we don't know. The biggest thing, though, is the trade war, and then, of course, we had the gas attacks in Syria. I don't know if you saw that, if it was real, fake, we don't know. The Russians say it was fake news. We say it's not. Either way, there's going to be a major announcement in regards to Syria in the next 48 hours. I know that we were hoping to get out of there. They're sucking us right back in, right? They suck you back in. So a big announcement out of Syria over the next 24 hours. If you're a big golf fan, the Masters, very exciting. Reed was the winner. He had to par the 17th and 18th holes, which he did to win, holding off Ricky Fowler and Jordan Spieth, and it was so funny because here's a guy, an American, right? Plays fantastic golf, and you can just tell everybody was so disappointed because they didn't want him to win. They wanted Ricky Fowler to win, and anyway, congratulations to him. I know all of you wanted to know how I did in my first ever Masters pool. I did not win. No. But on the good note, I didn't finish last either. So there you go. 800-951-0592. Tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day. The CBO is going to come out with its 10-year projections. Now, they don't actually mean anything because the CBO, kind of like the Federal Reserve, is the worst at projecting everything that they're supposed to project. It's almost really, why do we even have it? Why are we spending the money if they're not going to be accurate? And here's the funny thing. Not only are they not accurate, they know it. And Washington wants it that way. So think about this. Your tax dollars, our tax dollars, is being spent. And for those of you that don't know what the CBO is, that's the Congressional Budget Office. I would think, pretty big deal, right? Hey, these are the guys that are going to tell us what stuff's supposed to cost. And remember last week how I was going off about how they lie to us all the time, and I gave all the the NAFTA and GATT examples, Obamacare, the Trump budget cut or the tax cuts, and what was it? George Bush had the prescription drug and all of those things, right? And how much things were going to cost. And they always are wrong. And they always use the CBO. Well, the CBO says that it's going to reduce the deficit. It's going to pay for itself. So the thing that you need to know is this is how Congress set it up. Yeah, they actually set them up to be wrong. But don't worry, because I'm going to give you the keys to how we take the number that they're going to give tomorrow, which everybody expects that tomorrow, for the first time in the history of the United States, the CBO is going to say trillion-dollar deficits will start and not end over the entire 10-year period they're going to forecast. So I think I believe the 10 years that they're doing is 2019 to 2028, if I'm correct. And they're supposed to say we'll go over $1 trillion every single year. And of course, I'm going to tell you by the end of that 10th year, it's going to be closer to $3 trillion. But I'm going to tell you today what we're going to need to do to the CBO's projection to get to an accurate number. Yeah, how about that? So that's all coming up today. We also are going to, I just saw this. We haven't gotten the official numbers yet. I want to point that out. They haven't come out yet. But it appears that in the first 6 months of 2018, now remember, the federal budget actually starts in 2017. So fiscal 2018 is the fourth quarter of 2017, and then the first, second, and third quarters of 2018. That is the federal government calendar. The first 6 months is now over. The unofficial deficit number, $598 billion, which means we would have run a budget deficit in March. And again, the number's not out yet, of just over $200 billion. Remember, February's number was massive as well. We got a lot of ground to cover. We'll talk about the budget deficits. How big are they say they're going to be, and how big are they actually going to be when we get back? Patriot Radio News Hour, 800-951-0592. The trade war, call it what you like. Larry Kudlow, he was out today. It's so funny. This guy was on TV for 30 years telling us how great free trade was. Today, for the first time, he actually admitted that China has been, treating us unfairly. Better late than never, right? We'll talk about that, too, as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But I want to talk about the numbers that are going to come out tomorrow from the Congressional Budget Office. And here's just the thing, and I guess this is part of our problem. Listen, we don't want the public to know the truth, period. Tomorrow is going to be a perfect example of how much the government is really lying to us. You sit there and you think about, that they collect everything about us. The government already knows everything about us, right? If you got a smartphone and you belong to, Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or this or that, it doesn't matter. They know. And they just don't want us to know. And they created the Congressional Budget Office. I mean, it sounds very official. And this is the group that's supposed to help Congress keep track of the money. The problem is they set them up to not be able to do their job accurately on purpose. It's almost like would you do a report if you knew it was wrong? Why spend the effort, right? If you knew whatever the answer is going to be wrong, because we're going to make sure you can't use actual data. I'll give you some examples. The statutes that the Congressional Budget Office was set up on does not allow for the CBO to account for any of the, I'll call them tax breaks, or it doesn't really matter what you want to, special discounts, if you will, that Congress routinely extends every single year. So there's a bunch of tax breaks that they gave out 2 decades ago that every year they just say, you know, and there was tax breaks that were set to expire. I guess that's the best way to explain it. That they were set to expire, but every year Congress goes through the motions and then extends it. And they've been extending these things. Some have been extended 2, 3, 4 years. Others have been extended like 20 years in a row. They're not allowed to put that in. Nope, you got to follow whatever we said the law. So, and they actually do it that way so they can make sure the CBO number looks better than what it's supposed to be. I mean, think about it. Congress knows they're going to renew them all. And they also know that we know that they know, right? But they don't want the CBO to have that number in their baseline. Another one, what they call supplemental appropriation. Now, these are things where we're not sure how much money is going to be spent, but we know it's going to be spent. Here's a good example. Disaster relief would fall into that. We got a big announcement coming up on Syria in the next 48 hours, which my guess may include either, us sending troops, or maybe we're going to lob a couple of missiles over there. We lob 20, 30, 40 missiles. That's, $30, $40 million. But we do know that since 1981, the CBO has tracked that number. And we could take an average. I mean, right, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Hey, you know what? We looked at 30 years, and over 30 years, Congress always spends about 0.5% on supplemental appropriation. Right? Put that in there. Because we're going to spend it. Right? We're not sure where, but it happens every year. That's not in there. And when you think about, when you're talking about a number that big, right, you're talking, roughly an extra $50 billion a year. Right? Figure the tax break number, that's probably $50 billion a year. You see where I'm going? I've already got $100 billion. The other thing that they don't do is the bailouts and stimulus programs that Congress always has in their budgets that don't get put on to the CBO. They're also not allowed to show any type of negative growth. That's not allowed. Yeah. I did not know. I thought they could, and they just didn't. But apparently, according to what they're allowed and not allowed to do, they are not allowed to show a negative number. So, over the years, since 1993, they've been doing this exercise. So once a year, I went to public school, so 7, 18, for the last, 25 years, they've been putting out this 10-year projection number. And again, with all of these restraints that they know whatever the number is, it won't be accurate. The nice part about it is we know over the last 25 years the average of how much they've been off. So if you would like tomorrow when we get the number. Now, everybody's saying that the number is going to be more than $1 trillion a year. So, I mean, just simply 10 years, $1 trillion, that's $10 trillion. Right? They said it's going to be more than that. So I don't know how much more. Maybe they're going to come up with a number like 12. Let's say $12 trillion. I don't know. I'm going to guess $12, $13 trillion. Our deficit's $21 trillion. You add 21 and let's add 12. That's 33. The problem, or the number you need to add to 33 to get the correct number, is 27%, which would make the 10-year number 40. If they use 12 trillion, 41 trillion 910 billion would be the size of the national debt that would be 2028. Assuming they use 12 trillion. If they use more than 12 trillion, it'll be more. If they use a little less, it'll be less. But I did want at least to point that out. This is on average how much they're off. Just a little bit. Just 27%. And most of the rest, so what's the difference? Because we know that tax appropriations that they're going to extend, the fact that we know there's going to be some miscellaneous spending, as we mentioned, disaster relief, lobbing some missiles or whatever it may be, that's not in there. That's not 27%. The rest of the deficit, the rest of that 27% becomes because they're just too optimistic on their projections, right? They always say GDP never as good as it's supposed to be. They always have it too high. They also have, obviously, spending too low, and when you do that, you come up with an error rate of about 27%. So tomorrow when we get the number, I'm going to add 27% to it, and then we can determine how big the budget deficit is actually going to be. Now, having said that, just think about it for a minute. When I started talking about how big the budget deficit was going to be, it was 2015. That was my baseline. In 2015, and really it was, 2016, was right when the presidential election was coming into effect. And on Inauguration Day, which would have been January of 2017, the budget deficit was, $19.6 trillion. And I was telling you by 2025, the budget deficit was going to be somewhere between 35 and $40 trillion. And now I'm going to tell you right now, I think I'm low. And I'm going to give you some numbers, and these aren't official yet. These are unofficial first 6 months of 2018. Federal budget deficit, $598 billion. And here's the big part. Most of this wasn't with the tax cuts yet. $71 billion more than the shortfall recorded during the same period last year. Here's the problem. April is, obviously we got the tax ban here at the end of the week. Right? No one likes that. But we're going to have a much worse April number. And so when you think about if we just doubled it, it'd be $142 billion. We ran 660. We're going to be close to $1 trillion this year. It's going to be real close. Revenues and outlays were higher. And this is the point. We know that revenues are going to be lower going forward, and they've been trending that way already. Revenues were up 2%. Okay, that number is expected to probably go to about 0. Outlays were up 5%. And 5% of a much bigger number, by the way. Total receipts will round up $1.5 trillion. So my guess is we're only going to bring in about $3 trillion this year in revenue taxes, $3 trillion. Last year they brought in about $3.3 trillion. So there's your, I think we're going to get real close to the trillion. And again, these are CBO numbers. I hate to say that. They said that for the first 6 months of 2018, revenues were up $26 billion. And remember, and we're going to lose that $26 billion plus tax come next month. Individual income and payroll taxes rose by $56 billion. Amounts withheld from workers' paychecks rose $47 billion. The change largely reflects increases in wages and salaries that were partly offset only beginning in February. Remember, that was supposed to be, you're supposed to notice more money in your check. But these were the numbers as of the moment. Non-withheld payments of income and payroll tax rose by $11 billion. Income tax refunds was up by $3 billion. Corporate income tax fell 22%, or $22 billion. Half of that occurred in December. Not sure why, but December was bad. It shouldn't have been, and it's going to get worse. Revenues from other sources fell by $7 billion. Those are mostly fees and fines, by the way. So that was the revenue that were added all up. All of the revenue up, and you only had an increase of $26 billion. What about the outlays? Where are we spending the money? That's next.
This is the Phyllis Schlafly Report, a daily broadcast from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, a national volunteer organization founded by Phyllis Schlafly and continuing to uphold her legacy by opposing radical feminism and representing a traditional conservative perspective in our nation's capital. Now, the president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, Ed Martin.
After the poor showing by the U.S. men's hockey team at the Winter Olympics, it was inspiring that the Stoneman Douglas boys hockey team of Parkland, Florida, captured the state championship in February and could represent their state at the national championships in March. The sister of one of the team's players was among the recent shooting victims at Stoneman Douglas High School. Boys hockey is thriving at the high school level, but rising stars will find limited opportunities to play when they get to college. There are only a few dozen competitive college men's hockey teams, not enough to develop the talent needed to compete with the rest of the world. As a result, a ragtag team of Russians humiliated the U.S. men's Olympic hockey team with a 4-0 drubbing in Pyeongchang, South Korea. When the U.S. women's hockey team won the gold in a victory against Canada, there was praise, but none of the national excitement that occurred when our men's hockey team defeated the Soviet Union at Lake Placid in 1980. Men's hockey is far more popular than women's hockey for both men and women spectators. Unfortunately, federal regulators who implement Title IX against college sports refuse to recognize this fundamental difference between men's and women's sports. Regulators require colleges to provide more athletic opportunities for women than for men, simply because there are now more women than men attending college. Under this so-called proportionality test, which ignores the greater interest in men's sports than in women's, colleges have eliminated hundreds of men's sports teams, many in Olympic sports categories. This hurts our national competitiveness and induces many young men to opt out of going to college where they're prevented from competing in the sport they love. The Title IX regulators' quota that limits men's sports to their proportional enrollment in college is senseless and not part of the law that Congress enacted in 1972. It's based on a regulatory interpretation first imposed by President Jimmy Carter to appease the feminists, and President Trump could repeal it along with many other regulations he's been properly rescinding.
This has been the Phyllis Schlafly Report from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. You've seen the desperation of women's marches, the disgrace of Planned Parenthood, the rise of savvy young conservative women. Radical feminism is heading down a dead-end road. Voice your opinion on what's really important to women at phyllisschlafly.com. That's phyllisschlafly.com. Thanks for listening, and join us again for the Phyllis Schlafly Report.
Welcome back, 800-951-0592. We're doing a little prepping for the big CBO announcement tomorrow, which for the first time in our history, we're going to admit that we are going to run trillion-dollar deficits for the rest of our life. or till we default or change the money, which may be coming a lot sooner than that. But I wanted to get us ready. So before the break, we had $22 billion of extra revenue come in the first 6 months of 2018. And we don't expect that trend to continue. But money going out rose by a much larger number. Outlays for the first 6 months of 2018, $2.1 trillion. So we brought in 1.5. We spent 2.1, right? That's simple math. That's a $600 billion difference. And again, this is the good number. I mean, you double the number and you're like, hey, that's 1.2 trillion. I mean, I know we got April, which is supposed to be a good revenue month, but this April's not going to be nearly as good. But let's look at where the money went. Social Security. Benefits rose 4%. Now keep this in mind. If, and this is an if they are right and inflation is really rising, which we can debate whether it is or isn't, and of course we know that it is, but their number, the COLA adjustments could make this number far worse. But so far they keep telling us there's no inflation. Benefits were up 4%, right? We got more and more people going on Social Security. So that equates to about $40 billion a year right now. And that number is going to keep growing. Remember, 10,000 people a day retire, and they're going to retire every year for the next 10 years. But right now, that was the first 6 months of this year, $19 billion went there. So just kind of think about all of the growing stuff. When you think about Social Security, you think about Medicaid and Medicare. Well, Medicare in this case, Medicaid the state. So Social Security and Medicare together, we're probably looking at, and I'm going to ballpark it, about $100 billion a year at a minimum. And if inflation gets hot, it can go to $200 billion a year. Every year, it goes up that much. So think about 10 years, right? All of a sudden, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's $1 trillion. Right? You see how quickly I'm going to get to $3 trillion. Right? I already know in 10 years' time, Social Security and Medicare are going to cost us $1 trillion more than it does today. And today, these two programs cost us about $2 trillion. In 10 years, they're going to cost us $3 trillion. How about the next one, though? Outlays for net interest on public debt. I've been warning you about this number. Was up 12%. And guess what? That number is only getting higher. Every time we get one of those quarter of a point deals, right, it costs us more money. Right now, they estimate that the net interest is going to go up somewhere between $40 to $50 billion for the year. In addition to all the new debt that we've got to put on top of that, right? It's not just that. So up 12% and rising, right? Because we still expect at least 2 more hikes, if not 3. Government received $16 billion less from Fannie and Freddie, right? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, $16 billion. That just tells you what the real state of the housing market is. In other words, they just can't get a lot of loans for the to fit into the Fannie and Freddie requirements. I mean, look at it. Just a average new home is almost outside of the Fannie Freddie realm anyway. But that number was down $16 billion. Department of Homeland Security, which are included in the other category, and they singled out Homeland Security. My guess is because that's where most of the spending is. That was up 56%. You don't think they're watching? By the way, that translated into $14 billion. Now, I will say this, in fairness, disaster relief is in the other category as well. So that number is going to be much higher again this year, right? Because they parcel it out, right? They don't give Puerto Rico or the states got hit by the flooding and the hurricanes. They don't give them all the money at once. It's X billion this month and X billion next month. Spending on military, again, another number that is going to go up, rose by $12 billion. Estimated deficit for March. Okay, so this is another sideline. So that was the total number for the first 6 months. March by itself, $207 billion is the estimated size of the budget deficit for March of 2018. That's up. Wow, that can't be. That's incredible. Just give me a second here. I go to public school. It's up 14.5% year over year. This is how much bigger things are really getting. Corporate income tax payments were down $9 billion, or 66%. That was the Trump tax cut. Individual refunds declined by $12 billion. So you know what? There's less refunds being handed out. I guess that would help. I mean, that's, I guess, a good number. Maybe that's why retail spending hasn't been so good. Is we got $12 billion less in refunds. Total spending in March, $420 billion. Wow. I mean, if you did that every month, which that'd be $5 trillion in monthly spending. Government received $14 billion from less than Fannie and Freddie. Social Security was up 5% in March. Medicaid was up 10%. Interest on the debt was up 10%. Patriot Radio News Hour. We live in a debt world, don't we? We'll be back right after the break. And this number is going to get real big. So 2 straight months in a row now, we've ran budget deficits that have exceeded $200 billion a month. Get ready. That's going to be the norm. I'm just letting you know now. Social Security, 5%. Medicare, 5%. You know, just plan on that every single year. And that's assuming, again, that inflation stays where it's at least the inflation they tell us about. Defense spending, right? We know we're blowing that thing up. Fannie and Freddie way down. I mean, think about it. These are big numbers down. You know, think about it. We may get somewhere around $30 billion gone from Fannie. And you know what? I've heard some reports that we may actually have to bail them out again. Not like the last time, but they're running into some tough times because they can't give out new loans. And then you start adding up the tax cuts, and are we going to look? You know, doesn't look like we're going to get the big growth that we had hoped for. And these numbers get awfully ugly. Right now, gold's up 13.36. Silver's up a dozen. Let's call it a baker's dozen. 16.49 on silver. The Dow's kind of what I'll call the relief rally from. It was down 574 points on Friday. It's up 340 points At the moment, the dollar is down. Larry Kudlow was out on the idiot box this morning. You know what? He really should just not talk anymore. Totally walking back 30 years of misdeeds on China's trade. You know, when he was on TV, he was telling you how great NAFTA and GATT were. Here's what the thing that was interesting and what Larry Kudlow talked about on TV today of how North America needs to work together with its currency, right? Kind of rehashing the Amero thing. And I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating. Maybe we go to, as you start looking at these debts, you start to get the picture, right? You start to understand why it is that I tell you we're in the early innings here. That the gold from 250 to 1900, that was the warm-up act. You know, the debt in 2000 was $5.7 trillion. Okay, 5.7 trillion. It's now 21 trillion, and in the next day or two, we're going to have another big jump. So I'm going to say 21 trillion. And I know right now it's 21.125, but it's going to jump again. So 21.25, 21.3, 21.4 trillion. And I'm going to tell you right now that in the next 10 years, we're going to take that number plus another, I don't know, we could be talking about a number near $50 trillion. That would mean a 10-year average of $1.5 trillion. That's very, quite honestly, well, that's $15 trillion on a 10-year average there, but I really think it's 2.5. Right? The CBO, my guess is the CBO is going to come out with $1.5 trillion over 10 years. I think the number could be $2.5 trillion over the next 10 years, which would put us right somewhere around $45, $50 trillion. And all of a sudden, Larry Kudlow comes out on TV and he's talking about trade, but then he starts talking about how maybe North America needs to start working together as far as their currencies go. And all of a sudden you start to think about, what is the new currency going to look like? Are we going to go straight to a global? Maybe not. Maybe we do some form of a regional type currency. At least Larry Kudlow brings that point up again this morning. And I'll get the direct quote for you here in a minute. But I just thought of all the things that he said, that was by far, right, the most telling. You know, the fact that he came out and said, hey, I was lying to you for 30 years, and yes, China has not been treating us fairly on trade, and it's high time that we did something about it. China's no longer a third world country. You're a first world country, and you have to act like it. This was Larry Kudlow today. The president's got to stick up for himself and the United States. Where was that, Larry? But then he talked about how the United States, Canada, and Mexico need to start working together in regards to their currencies. What does it mean? What is he talking about? Why would that come up? I mean, remember, we used to talk about an Amero 15 years ago. Is that going to be what's next? an electronic North American currency. Either way, the dollar's on its way out, and you need to get ready, and we're going to help you do it next. Final segment, this just hitting the tape. Zero Hedge is reporting it, so I'm going to tell you about it. According to SGH Macro, they are a consulting agency to hedge funds. They are reporting over the weekend, they released a note to their hedge fund clients. China has already signaled an aggressive and potentially more ominous escalation in the development in the trade wars to the White House. Now, this morning, the White House is saying, hey, we're ready to deal. From what we understand, the Chinese government has halted its purchases of U.S. treasuries, despite direct encouragement, according to Chinese sources, by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, for China to just stay put. In other words, hey, you don't have to buy anymore, but keep buying what you're buying. According to, and again, this is HGH Macro reported by Zero Hedge, Beijing has apparently discontinued purchases of U.S. treasuries. If that's true, it is going to be a wild, wild week. Today we have, this is a one-time, when they're gone, probably never to be seen again. We have 40 $20 gold pieces. I don't even know what they are. They could be libs, they could be saints, it could be a mix. I don't know. We're going to sell them below spot. Right now, spot is $13.36. We've got 40 $20 gold pieces at $13.35 at 800-951-0592. I'll follow up on this story tomorrow. I'll also get you Larry Kudlow's quotes about maybe the United States, Canada, and Mexico needing to get together. But as it's just hitting the tape here, that China may have already halted purchases of U.S. treasuries that will definitely create a lot of heartburn in the treasury markets. I've got 40 $20 gold pieces, $1 below spot at $13.35 at 800-951-0592. U.S. Silver Eagles, they're now at $390 a roll, $390 a roll on U.S. Silver Eagles. I'm going to tell you right now, take the time and put them away. We're going to see what the CBO, how bad the budget deficits are going to be in the CBO's report tomorrow, and then we're going to take that number, and based on the numbers for the last 25 years, we're going to have a real good clue as to how big the United States budget deficits are going to become. And I'm going to tell you right now, I just don't see any other way about it. This money's going to go somewhere. I think it's going to end up in the gold markets. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Wow, this just got real exciting. We'll be back tomorrow.